there are occasions when presidents have attempted to stretch the boundaries and to make use of their executive authority in ways that have come under some question. One of those areas is in the use of signing statements, where president will get a duly enacted statute by Congress, and as an appendix to signing that document will issue a statement indicating how the president intends to go about executing the law based on his own intents and reading of the statute. It becomes controversial because many constitutional purists argue that the president really has only the option by the Constitution of signing a bill or vetoing it. And this is a kind of third way between that. President Clinton made fairly substantial use of this. It came under some disrepute during the George W. Bush presidency because President Bush's legal staff often had him sign or issue signing statements to provisions that Congress enacted, which seemed to indicate that he was exercising what's called a line item veto, which is picking and choosing which aspects of a particular law he'd like to see enacted, which most people agree is not a constitutional provision. But the fact is that signing statements are around and have, in fact, been used that way.
Executive orders are edicts, essentially, from the White House, from the president, that have the force of law. They are bound, in some sense, by what legislation or the Constitution says they can address. There are areas that presidents cannot exercise power via executive order. There are areas where presidents have the discretion to do so. The challenge that it presents, even though it does have the force of law, is that it is narrow in scope, only to what they're allowed by statute or by the Constitution, and they are temporary, in that any executive order issued by a president can be rescinded by the next president or by that same president at any moment.
The use of executive orders is similar to the disposition of presidents when it comes to working with the agencies. In other words, presidents are given some latitude by law, congressionally adopted law, properly adopted law. They're given some latitude to make decisions, again, interstitially, in between what the core of a decision is and how it's executed out at the far end of the process. And so we've been through periods where presidents have exercised their prerogative of issuing executive orders fairly vigorously. It is an adjunct to the proper operationing of a modern administrative state. Again, that you cannot, as a legislative body, completely predict all of the various iterations of how something is going to take place in law once you adopt it. And so there has to be some authority somewhere that will allow for this interstitial decision-making, and that has been the prerogative of the president. The problem for presidents tends to come in when they're exercising that authority in ways that tends to be inconsistent with congressional opinion, or in ways that tends to be a bit overly bold in their determination of what can be done. There are certain limits to what presidents can do with executive orders, if for no other reason than the fact that Congress may come back and decide that they can overrule it, which they can. And one specific case that has come up in our oral history interviews with President Clinton was the pledge he made, which became very problematic to him, to allow gay service people to serve in the military. They eventually came up with a policy known as "Don't Ask, Don't Tell," which of course subsequently has gone by the wayside. But it was said among people who were involved in the Clinton campaign where this pledge was made that the president believed that he could do this by executive action. Once he became president, it was patently obvious he could not do it by executive action, not simply because there was a question about the legality of the action itself, but because it was very clear that members of Congress who were more conservative than him on this issue in 1993 would act to reverse it. So it's an easy thing for sort of constitutional purists to to wag their fingers at and say, no, you can't, look, Congress enacts, we execute. But the fact is, in a system of modern bureaucracy, there has to be some latitude and for the execution of congressionally made law, and that by wide acclamation exists within the presidency.
Presidents have used executive orders to accomplish policy changes in almost every corner of American life. President Obama, for instance, has issued executive actions, both orders and executive memoranda, around issues like immigration, around wages, around discriminatory issues. Presidents often use executive orders when dealing with military issues. It's one of the easiest ways to issue an order to the military that's not actually strategic in nature. Presidents have used executive orders, for instance, to free slaves. They have been used in broad scope. They have been used in very narrow, very bureaucratic, frankly, very boring ways as well, in non-controversial ways. But that said, it's something that every president uses. Every president loves to have the power to issue an executive order, even though most candidates for office argue that they're not going to use them as frequently.